In this video, I'm going to say a few words about drama of the middle of the 16th century. As we already know, in this period, drama started to become more complicated, thus developing from the previously existing forms into the forms that we know now, those of comedy and tragedy. Many plays that were created in this period were created in the imitation of ancient Roman and Greek tragedies and comedies, because they actually borrowed the main pattern and the format of those dramas. So that is why these dramas can be called classical drama or classical plays. I'm quite sure that in your literature classes you have spoken about the classical drama created in Russia, and I should say that the classical drama of England is quite similar to that. They share most of their rules and features because both of them were based on the style of ancient drama. It was typical for a classical drama to have a chorus. The chorus usually summed up the development of the events at the end of each act of the play, and also gave some moral observations, this way helping the author to transmit his message to the audience. Also, typically, there was very little action on stage when presenting classical dramas, and classical plays also had three more rules called three dramatic unities. These three dramatic unities were the unity of place, the unity of time, and the unity of action. The unity of place, единство места, means that the whole play had to be presented in one and the same location. The location could be changed very rarely if the author needed it really badly, but that was not quite typical for the plays of this period. The unity of time, единство времени, means that the whole plot of the play had to be developed within 24 hours. It couldn't extend over longer periods of time. Well, they could present some preceding history or some events that followed the main plot, but the whole main plot needed to be revealed within 24 hours. And finally, the unity of action, единство действия, means that the play needed to present just one main topic and one main storyline. And even if the author wanted to introduce some secondary characters or secondary storylines, he could only use them to emphasize the main storyline and the main message of his play. So, as you can see, classical plays were quite rigid plays with a number of limitations that didn't allow the playwrights of the time to develop their potential fully. So that is why quite soon there appeared a movement of dramatists who rebelled against all those rules. Those dramatists called themselves university wits. That is because all of them were men of academic learning, mostly coming from Oxford or Cambridge. And basically speaking, the university wits were the people that created the English national drama. Well, many people before them contributed to it, as well as some authors after them, but they created the basis. They reformed the drama that had existed before their work, and each of them contributed significantly to the development of drama in England. Well, university wits rebelled against everything that was typical for classical drama, so they rejected the three dramatic unities, and that allowed them to change the location of play as often as they needed, to extend their stories over longer periods of time, and to introduce as many topics and as many storylines as the author wanted. Also, they got rid of the chorus. They didn't use the chorus any longer, and their dramas were actually dramas of action. They were very dynamic and eventful. And thanks to all those changes, the drama created by University Weeds finally started to look natural and true to life. They were able to portray real life situations and make their characters look and sound natural, just like real people. So finally, the characters were coming close to living human beings, and their dramas came really close to real life. That probably explains the enormous popularity that drama of the University Weeds had. Well, some examples of University Weeds, some people who belong to this group, were John Lilly, Thomas Kidd, Christopher Marlowe, and others. Not many of them are well remembered by name, but well, we surely know about a number of their contributions to the drama that they made. And now I would like to give a bit more attention to one of the University wits, whose name was Christopher Marlowe. Some of his contemporaries, as well as some later scholars of literary studies, actually say that Christopher Marlowe was incredibly talented, more talented than most other dramatists of his time, and probably even as talented as Shakespeare. But due to the events of his biography, he didn't manage to develop his talent to the full. So let's take a look at some facts of his biography. Well, Christopher Marlowe came from a middle-class family. His father was a businessman who lived in Canterbury, worked and lived in Canterbury, and Christopher Marlowe studied at Cambridge University. There he got under the influence of the ideas of the Renaissance, and the influence that those ideas had on him was huge. He was under great impression, and he felt as if he was discovering a whole new world with the help of the new ideas of Renaissance. And also, while studying at Cambridge, Christopher Marlowe met some of the dramatists of University wits, so they shared their ideas on their creative work, and they influenced one another's creative style, and probably all of that helped to shape Christopher Marlowe's talent. Actually, very little is known of Christopher Marlowe's life after he graduated from university, and the next fact that we know for sure is that he was killed at a tavern at the age of 29, which was a really young age, even by the standards of those times. We don't quite know why he was killed there on that day. There are many versions. For example, some people say that Christopher Marlowe was not only a dramatist, but also worked as a secret agent for the Queen, and he was on some sort of a dangerous mission, which led to his murder, just like in a spy movie. Other people say that he worked for the Queen as a part of a secret service, but he was not quite loyal to his country and was planning to sell some important information to the representatives of other countries. So probably that's why he was killed by the Queen's own secret service. And some people even suppose that it was just personal because of a love affair that Christopher Marlowe had. It could have been even a coincidence, and we'll never know for sure why that happened, but we can be quite sure about some facts on his creative work. Christopher Marlowe worked in the genre of tragedy, and there are four tragedies written by him that have survived till nowadays. But the best known one is the one called Dr. Faustus. You surely know the story. That's because Christopher Marlowe didn't actually invent the plot himself. He just borrowed it from an old German legend. Well, nowadays we could probably say that it's just plagiarism, but according to the standards of the 16th century literature, that was quite a common thing to do, and we know quite well that Shakespeare actually didn't invent most of his plots either, but many writers of those times just borrowed their plots from various sources, such as historical chronicles of real-life events, earlier written literary works, old legends and myths, and many other sources. Well, Dr. Faustus was one of those works, so the plot was borrowed from a legend, but the uniqueness of this work lies in the way Christopher Marlowe presents this plot. The thing is that Christopher Marlowe approached history from a Renaissance point of view, and in all of his tragedies we can see strong men who fight for their own benefit. They are strong, outstanding personalities, and no enemy can overcome them except for death, and they are ready to challenge men and gods with their strength, no matter what. Well, speaking about the plot of Dr. Faustus, you know very well that it speaks about a scholar, a scientist, who is ready to sell his soul to the devil in exchange for power and knowledge. Dr. Faustus does not only want to learn a lot of new information, but he also wants to have power over the world. As the tragedy puts it, all things that move between the quiet poles shall be at my command, which means that the whole planet should obey Dr. Faustus. But things go wrong when 24 years later Dr. Faustus meets a beautiful lady called Helen and falls in love with her, and he wants to get his soul back, but it is actually too late for that, and he can't go back on his deal with the devil. One other really important thing to say here is that Christopher Marlowe changed the whole understanding of a tragedy for the people of the Renaissance. Before him, a tragedy was typically performed to show horror and crime on stage, but Christopher Marlowe made his works more psychological. He wanted to reveal the suffering of man. He penetrated into his characters' feelings and emotions and presented them to the audience. And another significant contribution made by Christopher Marlowe is the introduction of blank verse. The Russian for this term is белый стих. It's a kind of verse that is not rhymed. William Shakespeare is actually known for using blank verse in his plays, but in fact he was not the first one to do that. Actually, Christopher Marlowe introduced that not long before Shakespeare. So that will be it about Christopher Marlowe.